Evening, everyone. We welcome all from the land and people you represent. I am on Whadjuk country here in Perth, Western Australia. I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land we are situated on. For me, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and for all other Aboriginal people from other lands where you come from. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present and emerging. We celebrate the continuing traditions, living culture and the spirit. As we gather to meet tonight, may we be filled with the spirit of each of our land. Our prayer tonight is the YCW prayer. And as we pray this, let us think about all the workers, all the workers who have gone before us, who are working today and, wanting to make a difference. Lord Jesus, a worker like me, help me and all my fellow workers to think like you, to work with you, to pray through you, to live in you, to give you all my strength and all my time. May your kingdom come in all our factories, farms, workshops, offices, and our homes. Be everywhere better known, better loved, and better served. Deliver us from injustice and hatred, from evil and sin. May our souls remain in your grace today, and may the souls of every worker who died on Labour's battlefield rest in peace. Amen. Back to you, Stefan.
Thanks very much, Gemma, and welcome to everybody. Tonight we have two speakers for our presentation on Cardijn's classical document, series of lectures, The Young Worker's Faces Life. Our first speaker will be Mark Ager, a former member of the YCW in Adelaide, where he worked for many years with our famous and well-loved chaplain, Father Hugh O'Sullivan. Later, he was a member also of the diocesan team for Adelaide, also working with Father Tom Gleeson. And it was while he was doing that work that he was introduced to a small little book called The Young Worker Faces Life, which he found as a great source of inspiration for the work that he did with the movement. He's now a keen member of the Australian Cardijn Institute and also of the Cardijn community. And he writes regular social inquiries for that community. Our second speaker will be Joe Catania. Joe is a teacher now. He's a director of faith and mission at St. Dominic's Priory College in Adelaide, a role he's held since 2023, last year. Before that, he was assistant principal for religious identity and mission at Cardijn College in the south of Adelaide, where he worked for 10 years. And he also had previous experience working in youth ministry and liturgy at Cardijn College and at Noarlunga Seaford Catholic Parish. But prior to that, he was a businessman with his own business and his own trade, and he taught his craft. So both of you got great experience in different fields, and we welcome you both tonight. And Mark, you're the first person. I'll hand straight over to you.
So this talk, that book, The Young Worker Faces Life, the talk in there was from 1961. But it seems that Cardijn used to give a talk every year at the Godin Lectures. And I think that the talk, Young Worker Faces Life, has probably developed and changed a few times. So the version of the talk is the one on the Cardijn Institute website. That's the one that we're using to analyse today. And I just want to acknowledge all of Stefan's work with the Institute for collecting all of this stuff. It's a very, very useful resource for the whole world. So when we have a look at Joseph Cardijn's talk, he's talking about the divine mission, the young Christian workers, empowering young workers to fulfill their potential, to be positive contributors to the community, etc. A little about Joseph Cardijn's speaking style. I realise that this audience is very familiar with Joseph Cardijn's speaking style, but if you weren't familiar with it, you may find it that it was very engaging, passionate, it's empathetic, it's simple, relatable language. And these lectures are talks, they're not written. So the style, he's talking to, quite a large audience. So that's the style of the actual talks itself. He's using language of the day. So, for example, it's after the First World War, the Second World War. You'll sometimes see military language in there. You realise that he's using masculine all the time. We know we've learned a lot since then, but that was the language of the day. Joseph Cardijn, his first unions were with women, so clearly, he was, pretty cool. But he does use male language, and he's talking to priests sometimes. I know when I read this, I found it difficult to understand some of the church language and some of the Marxist type language of the day. But once you get over that, it's still very, very strong, powerful stuff. And I find, today's language is quite often tame. It's politically correct, tame. Joseph Cardijn's talks are hard-hitting, full of challenge, and that's what I found when I read those talks. When I first read them, I was 21 years of age. I used to sit in a baker's van. That's what I did. I'd have my iced coffee there, my feet up on the dash, and I read that young worker's face's life. And I thought, wow, this is really inspirational stuff.
Look, for me, really, it wasn't until I started working at Cardijn College that I started to sort of have some understanding of who Joseph Cardijn was. Previously, I had no idea about Joseph Cardijn and the YCW movement. So I'm talking in the turn of the millennium. In 2003, I started at Noarlunga Seaford Parish with Cardijn College and had never heard of Cardijn. So over my time of 20 years, I started to learn a bit more about Joseph Cardijn, about the YCW movement. And certainly in my time, we started a YCS group, and through my formation of connecting with the Cardijn Community Australia, people like Stefan and Mark and Wayne and David and so on, and Joe, did I start to really understand the context of what he was on about. So as I read this book, I'm trying to place myself in that historical context of the time. And as I'm listening to the language, I also can't help but think, how is something like that relevant to what I'm doing today in my role as an educator, I work at an all-girls school with these students, particularly around the church language, like vocation, like an apostolic mission. Service, I think, we've got service pretty much, wrapped up here, because the girls are quite active in their community service. But as far as understanding their mission and their vocation in life, that's an interesting one for me that I'm very curious about and exploring with the students. Now, I certainly know that for Cardijn, it was about the dignity of the person and the dignity of work. And there's just one quote that there's many, but the one that I as I'm reading, I'm struck by a few quotes. And for me as an educator, this was one that stuck with me. Our schools must be seminaries for the production of apostles, not merely for the foreign mission, but also for the missions of home, which sometimes are more difficult. And so I'm sure Mark will go on a bit to say about how for Cardijn, this ministry or this vocation was an awareness about the daily activities of one's life. So from the moment they got up in the morning to their time at work and to when they finish work, to their leisure and then back home. But you might say a bit more about that, and then particularly about those themes.
Yes. So we've kind of selected 4 themes. Sometimes I would like to read out what Cardijn said. And the reason for that is just to give people a taste of the language. I wish that I could say it in a Flemish accent, but I can't. It is what it is. But I think if we revisit the actual words of Cardijn, it will remember, how sort of forceful he was. And so shall we have a look at the 4 things, Joe? So basically, that's what we're going to be looking at.
Sorry, can I just interrupt? Did you share the slides then, Joe? I can't.
I did. You can't see it, can you?
For some reason, it's not showing up.
Okay, sorry. I'll just do it again. There you go.
Yeah, it's coming now. All right.
Sorry.
You'll go. We'll edit this out later.
No worries.
Yeah.
So, Stefan, can you still see me and Joe?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So I'll just let you guys just have a second just to look over that. I think, Stefan, if it's all right with you, rather than us give a big long spiel, what I'd like to do is to stop after each one. That'll give us a breather. And with the quality of people in the audience, they can kind of just jump in and react a little bit. Does that sound okay?
Yep. You're our presenters tonight, so feel free. Because
Paul Lenton, he'll probably have a good question, but he might not want to wait till the end. So the first thing we're going to talk about is mission. So Joseph Cardijn says that each person has a personal mission. That mission should be carried out in the ordinary acts of life in the young workers' natural environment. My understanding of mission was for professional people, like a lawyer or a doctor may have a mission, or a priest may have a mission, when they go overseas and stuff like that. I didn't really know that I had a mission, where I used to work at the furniture shop or whatever. So it was a completely new concept for me. This whole mission about bringing the kingdom of God and redemptive action, and only I can do this. I've got special gifts. It was a really new concept for me to think that I had a mission, and that mission came because I'm a Christian. I should use my gifts, my creativity, just like God. I've got creativity, and I should try to do redemptive action. I should try to change the world. It has shaped my attitude. It shaped my Christianity massively. What about you, Joe?
Look, it's interesting. My role is Director of Faith and Mission. And certainly I work in a Dominican school. And one of the things that our motto is truth. And we are about proclaiming the good news. And so our mission is to proclaim this good news. And it's grounded in a truth, and a truth in the dignity of each person. And certainly when I read that part 1 of the book, it is this understanding of meaning and purpose centered on a mission. And that mission was in everyday life. So yes, it was the mission of the young worker at work, but not exclusively. It was about an awareness of everyday life. Today, we use words like mindfulness. So having our students become mindful and awake and attentive to what it is that they're doing, who it is that they're engaging with, and how they're going about that in a way that is respecting the sacred dignity of each person.
I have a son, and I used to go into his bedroom. He was 14 years of age. It was the most disgusting bedroom, the most filthy, smelly experience. But of course, Joseph Cardijn was quite often working with 14-year-olds. You can imagine what they were like. And this is what Joseph Cardijn told these young people about daily life. He said this: YCW action is first the perfectly ordinary acts of everyday life. The young Christian worker does not get up in the morning like anyone else. He knows why he is getting up. Even if he has a headache, he gets up bravely and proudly, because he knows that this day he, and I'm saying she, Heather, he is she, has a mission to fulfill. He does not wash himself in the same way as other young workers, because he knows the value of his body. He does not go down to the kitchen as other young bogans do, demanding his boots. He is polite and helpful. What do you think of that, Joe?
Yes, and
You work with teenagers.
I do, and certainly for me, I think to myself, and we went out for tea before, and the young girl that served us, would she had any idea about getting up in the morning, whether she had a headache or not had a headache, and whether she knew she had a purpose and a mission that was about the kingdom of God? And I don't think so. And that's what's quite interesting for me. But I get that this was written for a time and to an audience that were familiar with the language and were familiar with, I guess, that mission. But certainly for me today, what's interesting is, and particularly when we go into the next one about formation, the one a bit further on, why do we want to form our young people or our young workers with this idea of their mission, their purpose, that is more than just being able to, understandably, try to save a bit of money to maybe even afford to rent a place? Because that's the reality today for young people who, I've got two young adults and have no idea whether they think they're going to be able to afford a house. So that's quite interesting for me. And, it'd be interesting, I'm sure, as you're reflecting on this, you're hearing the context of the time then with meaning and purpose and understanding of one's everyday activity. But how does it translate to today?
So, Joe, I don't know if you have read the book that Hugh Sullivan wrote about the clatter of wooden clogs.
I have a while ago, because I read it at Cardijn a number of years, and certainly connected our students with a chapter of it.
Well, basically, so Joseph Cardijn used to be in bed.
That's right.
And he would hear the clatter of wooden clogs. These are all the workers going to the factories really early in the morning, and their clogs are clattering on the cobblestones, and he used to hear that. And when he was a priest, he used to walk with the workers to the factory. And as he's walking with them, he'd be having conversations about their work and all the rest of it. Hello, Ashish, how are you? But when he arrived at the factory, he couldn't go in. They would go into the factory and he would have to stop at the factory gates. So therefore, whatever was going on in that factory, whatever exploitation, whatever safety problems, whatever sexual harassment was going on in that factory, the only people who could fix it was the workers. And that's the thing about being a priest. There's only so many places where they can go. So part of this whole mission is recognizing the importance of the lay person's mission in the world. It's good that we contribute within the church as well, of course, but our role in the world is absolutely vital. This was all new to me. I didn't think of anything about this. I just thought I had to go and, go to Holy Communion and sing,
Well, today it'd be Pope Francis who'd be saying that really with the priests, and not just the priests, but I would say also the laity, to smell like they're sheep. And that's what I hear as far as Cardijn, being able to walk and get to know them, so he could get to know, in a sense, the sheep, the flock that he was going to accompany and support.
So we go a bit more about what is the motivation for this. Well, it's divine. So Joseph Cardijn says we're made in the image of God. And we use this language a lot, but I'm not sure that this language was used a lot. I think Joseph Cardijn kind of introduced this language about the dignity of workers and the dignity of people and the concept of ordinary people having mission. I think the whole of the church and the world was influenced by his language. So he says, but the young worker's role is not only human, it is also divine. Each one takes the place of God. He is the image of God. He is like an agent or representative of God. If he will not carry out the mission that has been entrusted to him, Almighty God does not take his place. You might almost say that he cannot, because he made us free to carry out our part or not. It is because each one is a free agent that is responsible for human person and not a machine. It's hard hitting, like Joseph Cardijn saying to the young workers, your job is to go to that office, that farm, that factory, and bring Christianity there.
And certainly for me, what I can hear is a sort of leading into Vatican II and the empowerment of the laity from Vatican II. And that certainly, I can hear the echoes of that as it's coming into then the 60s, Vatican II.
Yeah. So, Stefan, we're going to have a break. We've done mission. Can we just open it up? I don't know if David's leading the questions, but can a few people just have a bit of a natter and talk for a bit?
Okay, we might need to, ask people to say something. So, yeah, David, this is your part of animating the conversation. So, over to you.
Just got to unmute yourself, David.
Yep. Okay. Sorry. Thanks. Yeah. Thanks. It was great just to hear your own personal responses to it. One, Joseph, translating it really to the modern day world, and Mark telling us, just reminding us, or revealing to me anyway, how hard hitting it was and how new. All very interesting. One of the things that struck me was the cover of it, and the cover of it is quite, well, I suppose it's of its time, the artwork, but it's very unusual and powerful. I don't know if I wonder if you or maybe Stefan knows about one who the Melbourne YCW published it. Who in the Melbourne YCW did all that sort of stuff, Stefan? Do you happen to know? Or I should know, but I will eventually, I guess. But
that I really couldn't tell you. I suspect Bill Armstrong may have had a key role in it, but yes, I really don't know about that. Actually, maybe I can make one comment on the actual document, which picking up on something that Mark said. It's true, the English version does have a lot of sexist language in it. But if you look at the original French, it's much less sexist. So actually, the English version more reflects our English language environment of that time around the 1950s, and how the male was used to represent the whole of humanity at that time. But I can tell you, Margaret Fever, who was a YCW full-timer in Belgium, who actually produced a lot of these documents, that is, turned the talks into actual publications. Marguerite was very strong on this point, and so the French version actually speaks about jeunes travailleurs et jeunes travailleuses. So right from the beginning, in 1949, the French version did emphasise both male and female. So I just thought I'd throw that in, Mark. So actually, if we want to blame the sexism of the language, it's more our English language sexism and the sexism of our language at that time. Yeah.
If I can make a couple of comments, you talked about the school being, or quoting from Cardijn, schools have to be seminaries for apostles. I think in my 41 years in Catholic education, it cost me a lot of promotions and I got into trouble a lot. It was very difficult because the school more and more, and Gemma would probably agree, as time went on, the school became more and more a place of instruction and meeting state standards. And when you try to bring in the idea their idea of social justice was collecting money, and I'm saying, but let's educate people about what the issues are. And that was always greeted. I had to fight every time. And that's the real issue. Another problem is church language, because in Melbourne in particular, we have a pale bishop. So, and we're still stuck with the problem of language, which young people just don't get. And the other thing I was made conscious of, with the role being still current, I went to my eldest granddaughter's Christmas breakup last night. No mention of the Christian story at all. We had kids, dancing to various pop songs which didn't even relate to Christmas. So this whole idea of secularization has really robbed the children of a deeper meaning. They still have the passion, but it's not rooted to anything deeper than, well, we should care about the environment or care about this, but it's not taken any further. So that while he said that a long time ago, it's even more current than it was then with the challenges we face in Australia.
thanks, Mark. Thanks, Wayne. Have you got a response to any of that, Joe or Mark, or does anybody else would like to comment?
Look, just the only thing I wanted to say really about the image, which I'd be curious too to find out, but certainly for Cardijn, what we know is It was the liberation from the slavery that would come with work that wasn't dignified, and you'll be a slave to that work. So when I look at that image, I see a breaking away from the slavery of a work that was not dignified. Dignified work, dignified for the worker.
Yep.
Yeah, if I could jump in too on that point. Yeah, I think that's a very good word that you mentioned there, Joe, liberation. Because, well, today we speak of liberation theology, which of course wasn't spoken of back in 1949 or 1961. Yeah, I personally believe there's a lot of Cardine's influence. There's no doubt, in fact, actually, there's a testimony. I think it was from Paul Lenton. Paul might want to speak about that. Gustavo Gutierrez speaking about what an important influence Cardijn was at that time. But yeah, that whole idea of liberation, I think, is very important.
So, Stefan, is it all right if we continue?
You don't have to ask me. You are
there you go.
the driver.
All right. So, hang on. Where are we? I'd like to say hello to Tom Knowles. He's just joined us. Hello, Tom. So, Tom, my name is Mark, and this is Joe, and we're talking about. We've just done mission, and now we're going to start talking about Cardijn, his ideas about formation.
Thanks for the welcome.
So the first thing that I would like to say is that Cardijn recognises that young workers are at the age of formation. So they joined the YCW at 18. They kind of had to leave at 25, I reckon. But we know that the age of formation is when there's a change. Like each big life-changing experience is an opportunity for personal growth. So starting your first job, voting, being able to consume liquor, going to war, getting married, leaving home, getting a driver's license, all of these things that happen with young people, all of those big rites of passage are an opportunity to consider the deeper meaning of life. And that's where, the chaplains would be able to say, okay, this is going on. What does that mean for you? They'd be able to ask, questions to draw out, the meaning of this particular situation. They're good opportunities. Cardijn also says that, you can't just leave young workers by themselves. They need to have some sort of formation. To not give them formation is a sin. He's hitting hard. He's saying, hey, listen, we've got a responsibility here. The other thing about Cardijn formation, it's not formation that sometimes people in the church normally see it. In other words, we're learning the Gospels. We might be learning, the commandments and this kind of stuff. For Cardijn, formation is a lot wider than that. It is a preparation for all of the responsibilities for life. So your mission could be, for example, as a married person, could be as a religious person, could be as a single person, or as a worker. All these particular missions and responsibilities. The YCW tries to form people so that they're organised, so that they've got the ability to talk, so that they're physically able, through sport, socially able, through, dances. They can handle responsibility through services that they run themselves. And so this is the formation that the YCW is talking about, the mission in the world. Joe, any thoughts?
Yes. I guess, we took formation, the National Catholic Education Conference this year, I think it was, and the topic was on formation and the importance of forming, particularly our staff within Catholic education. And so, as well, both Mark and I studied adult and vocational education. And, back then I remember speaking about lifelong and life-wide learning. And that's the context of Joseph Cardijn's formation, a formation for life. certainly with understanding that they are the people to make the change for themselves and for others. And I think you're going to speak on that sense of double transformation. Well, I think that's the next one, or you're going to allude a bit on that one there. So what we all know is the formation for Joseph Cardijn was central, but it was the formation of young people who were going to then lead and support other young people. So I don't think we have to go much more onto that, but you might like say a bit more before we throw it over.
Yeah, I always consider when I was in the YCW how we were going to change the world. But really, as young people, I know young people don't want to know this because they react badly to me when I say this. But when I left the YCW, my influence increased. Like, I got promoted. I was in workplaces where all of a sudden I was in charge of a lot of people. I had a lot of say. I had a fair bit of clout as I got older. So what happens to my idealistic commitment that I made when I was a young worker? Am I still in the fight? Or have I just kind of lost that all, become rusty and join in the world? Have I forgotten the commitments that I made when I was young? This is why I think it's important for us as adults to get together now and again, like we are tonight, and just remind each other of these ideals. So that's a little bit about formation. Well, now we're going to come back to the methods of formation a bit later. I'd be interested in asking Patrick and Joe if they have anything about formation that they would like to chuck in at this stage.
Well, while they're waiting, I also had the unique part of Cardijn formation was they not just talked to you, but at various basic statewide and national key leaders schools, you went out and you did it. And then he was prepared to accept young people making mistakes and then come back. There was no such thing as a mistake. It was like the invention of the light bulb. You come back and say, well, that didn't work. So what didn't work? But he wouldn't take over. He or any chaplain wouldn't take over. They allowed the young people to swim, to swim for themselves. And as they learned, then they would review it. But through the swimming, through the practical thing, that's what gave them the formation. Often you'd start with a very small action. As John Finlayson would say, he began the night he was handed a broom and clean the floor, as after a dance. It would start with something simple, and that's how people would discover their power. And then gradually you would keep increasing the challenges, but you would never do it for another member of the community. You'd encourage them to go out and do the doing and then reflect on what worked and what didn't. And that gave you the formation and the confidence to then go on and do the next step.
Thanks, Wayne. Patrick, you got something to say?
I was at an awards night for the school I spent many years in the other night. And the difference between the last one I was at, which was in the end of 2020 and 2024, was the increased role of students in the awards night. And it wasn't just providing the entertainment or being presented with awards, but teachers and staff generally were replaced by students. So students would bring out the awards to hand to the principal, to hand to the students receiving them. And when things went wrong, and they went wrong, particularly in the major part of the evening, the principal made sure that he stood with the student when things went wrong, and then attempted to try to correct the mistakes without sort of putting the student down. Mm. And when people in the audience saw what was happening and recognized what was going on, then there was a little titter went through the audience, and the principal smiled and encouraged the student to smile as well, so that everyone participated in the mistake. I am certain that after the event, as they prepare for next year's awards night, the student and the principal will work through what had gone wrong with an attempt to try and improve things for 2025. To me, this was a sign that even at the principal level, the adults in the school were involved in the formation of students, in helping them to develop their leadership skills. And it was really a beautiful act of service that I witnessed that night.
Thanks, Patrick. And you just reminded me, and to pick up on the words in this book, that Joseph Cardijn says something to the effect of that, and I would just aligning it from that example, the principal incarnated the leader.
Yeah.
And so Cardijn in this book talks of the incarnation, the leader incarnate. So it is that in the flesh, the leader is modeling it. And these young people, when they were being encouraged to smile, they themselves incarnated the leadership. And so that's a classic example of that sort of what we, when we look at this book, Cardijn formation, what the idea was. Yeah. So that's exactly right. And out of that also occurred the transformation of then the community who saw it, witnessed it. So that's a great example.
And you reminded me of one that occurred the day before. I decided to get my hair cut. So I went to my usual barber. He wasn't there. And the lady who cut my hair, when she found out that I had been at Colby Catholic College, she said, "Oh, I enrolled my children in that college." And then she told me of the day that she took her daughter along for an interview, and the principal interviewed her. And this is the same principal from the awards night. So he interviewed her. This young girl, who was probably in year 5 at that stage, thought of herself as being pretty dumb. She was very good at sport, but no good at the academics. And when she tried to explain that to the principal took her words and then turned them around to show her that she was not dumb. She was actually very, very intelligent, and certainly someone that he would like to see in the school. So, of course, that young girl left feeling really good about herself. To me, that's an important part of the formation process, to have people feel good about themselves, about the good that they are actually achieving, by having that reflected back to them by people who are strangers.
So maybe a good segue to move into the double transformation.
Yes. Yeah. I really appreciate what you're saying there, Patrick. I remember Jim Monaghan giving us a good talk about that, where he was saying that, through action and success, young workers can change their identity, and they can say, what kind of person am I? I'm a person that is not a victim, a person that can stand up for myself and be strong. Yeah. I noticed that Greg Lopez has joined us, but he's we can't even see his picture. He's just hiding. I think he's probably he's probably sitting in his pajamas or something. He's a bit shy, maybe, so we'll just forget about him. We're going to move on to the double transformation. So personal transformation inspires a revolutionary change in society, but also the individual. Double transformation, militants in the YCW, I'm sure Joe would say, would use that today. It's recognizing that we as individuals can grow and be formed through our action and reflection. We can become confident, we can become capable of organizing, we can articulate stuff, etc. But also through the actions, individual actions and collective actions, we can change the world. I remember when I was in the YCW, the chaplains there, they'd quite often ask why. So we're going to have a dance, Father Huey, are you? Why? Oh, we'd all have to stop. Yeah, why are we having a dance? And then, he'd ask this why a few times, and, it would be frustrating sometimes, but eventually we'd kind of think, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, we're doing this, there'd be a pause, all the rest of it. We realized that he's deepening our understanding by asking these questions. During the actual dance itself, we would learn skills, we'd organise stuff, we'd book things, we'd have a band there, we'd get our heads around how to actually consume liquor, how to have a raffle without losing all the money, how to behave properly with the genders and all the rest of it. So there was a lot of individual formation that happened, but also some of the huge campaigns about work choices, for example, casual work. Some of these huge campaigns, there's no doubt about it, that the representative action has gone out there, and unions have read it, the church has read it, politicians have read it. It has actually been quite influential and hard-hitting. And I've seen how unions and the church and the Labour Party have been influenced by the high-quality representative action that the YCW has done. So when we talk about formation, Cardijn is also talking about the influence of other young workers. Now, we know that as priests, as parents, as teachers, as footy coaches, we've all got a very important role to play. But we also know that young people have got their own world, their own leadership, and very often they are the ones that the young people go to, are influenced by. This can be a problem, of course, because they are young sometimes. But to have formed, responsible leaders amongst young people is very, very powerful. So Cardijn says priests, parents, teachers must reinforce this training, but no one in the world can replace the personal influence of another young worker. So it's this like for like thing. And Cardijn's talking about leadership. There's this thing, is the YCW for leaders or is it for the masses? We know that it's for both, but there's no doubt about it. But some of the best leaders in the church and in the world have had YCW formation. So is our leaders born or are they formed? So Joseph Cardijn says, in any house or street, bus or train, there is usually one lad who rules the roost, who is the life and soul of the party, who attracts others, at whose house they naturally meet, to whom they all look, who carries them all along with him. He is the born leader, with certain gifts, with more dash and go, who always takes the initiative and leads the others. So what happens to that born leader? Well, does he go off and become the leader of the outlaw bikie gang? Could do. Does he go off and he spends his whole life trying to accumulate wealth because of our free market economy kind of thing? Many a young worker has a wealth of character and driving force. He must make something of it, either for good or for evil. If he is attracted in the first place by communism, this is the times, the cinema or the dance hall, he is lost to the church and the working class. If only a priest, a teacher, or a fellow worker can attract him and get him into the movement, then he becomes a leader, a responsible person who starts things and keeps things going, who inspires, who carries others along. Once he is one, it is necessary to supernaturalize his gifts, his natural gifts, and turn him into an apostolic force. Clearly you can see Joseph Cardijn revving up the audience with this. What do you reckon, Joe?
Well, what we know is grounded in his faith, of course, Joseph Cardijn, who sees the model of Jesus as being able to transform his disciples, those that would follow him, to know of the impact and influence that would then have on other communities. And I think for Cardijn, the transformation was about the individual and the wider society. And so that's what he was really encouraging here. I was at Cardijn College at Noarlunga, if anyone does visit it. What they'll notice in the front entrance is a image of Joseph Cardijn, and it says, you don't find leaders, you form them. And it was always with a bigger picture. And so today, we still use the language of kingdom of God, And I guess with our students, we're saying that there was a vision of a bigger picture, one that we can see now and that is unfolding, that we have a hope for in the future. So what happens now has impact for an unfolding future. And that's really what he's summarizing in that part of the book.
So a real thing about Joseph Cardijn was getting young workers to act, like get them doing something. First of all, the action, small responsibilities. Somebody is sick, who can visit that person? Get them to take the minutes, etc. First the action, then afterwards the talk. So when I was in the YCW, for example, they asked me to take the minutes, and I didn't really know what I was doing. And I kind of faffed about a little bit, but eventually I got it. It was the first time I'd actually taken any responsibility, but it made a big difference. Now I was the secretary. Later on, I ran this fundraiser where we raised money for a wheelchair for a hospital. And later we all went as a group and we painted the parish house. These are all steps and actions that I remember us doing. We certainly sat around talking, but it was the actions that seemed to have formed us, built our confidence, and certainly attracted people to the YCW. I see here he talks about reflection, and the chaplain's got a big role in bringing about reflection, as we know, by the questions, etc. I see it says, he's talking about the leaders, you form him by conversation and friendship, you speak to him and get him to speak and see and reflect, you get his opinion. But he says that the chaplains don't go on and on. And you find that today. You see Jim Monaghan. You know, I remember Father Hugh O'Sullivan, and you see Jan Barnett, people like that. They don't hog the meeting. Young workers talk, young workers work things out. The chaplain might have a chaplain's talk at the end. Very often after the meeting, Father Hugh O'Sullivan would come up to me and say, Mark, you stuffed that up. You should have done this. Okay, thank you, Father Hugh. I'll remember that next time. You know. But the actual meeting itself, the chaplains were very discreet, and that is a real discipline for those chaplains. They should really be commended for their discipline. So at the YCW meetings, of course, we have the gospel reviews, which Patrick enjoys. We've got the social inquiries, we've got personal reviews, and all the rest of it. All these discussions using See Judge Act were used to form young workers in life. Today, we try to keep that going a bit by our quarterly reviews. Patrick does the gospel inquiries through the Institute, which is really good. Another aspect of formation is do before, do with, do after, which is a Flemish thing. So one must do the work oneself. Because you've done it, you can show other people how to do it. Then they do it, you do it with them, you help them and support them. And then finally they do it, you back off, let them have a go. You're still around. That do before, do with, do after is very, very good. It's very simple. I used to use it in my workplace all the time. I can tell you that probably 2,000 probationary constables in South Australia have used do before, do with, do after as a way of learning policing on the job in South Australia.
Just while you've paused there, Mark, and Cardijn in the book says that these 3 stages, like they're the essential aspects of formation. Just when Mark was chatting, I could hear that in the book, and in this particular part, it seems to me, he speaks of the practical aspects of the young people coming together and the way in which they organise themselves. And that's what I read in this particular part of the book. So that's the double transformation. I'm just sort of conscious of time. I think what we'll do is we'll finish off with the dignity of work, and then I think we'll pause and then come up with some conversation.
Sounds good, Joe.
So the last sort of theme that we really sort of want to address was the dignity of work.
Yes. As you know, if we go to church, there would be no church without the workers. There would be no altar without the workers. There'd be no pews without the workers. So the workers contribute by their work, by their expertise, pretty well for everything. And workers need to be respected. As the Pope said, if you want to be a lay person in the world, the first thing you need to do is develop competence at your work. And the priests, of course, are very holy people, and they've got all the things that priests do to do communion. But see this here, this is Joseph. This is, can you see that, everybody? This is Joe's mouse. So he's at his workplace here. And so this is Joe's pattern or whatever. You know, this is, he uses this for his work. Work is a prayer, the dignity of the workers, the dignity of work. It is very, very good stuff, especially if you've got to go to a factory and it's crap, you know, but you keep your own dignity as a worker. The final bit about Joseph Cardijn's talk, I'll let you have a look at it, but he's really hard-hitting about apostolic mission. The working class will rise again because it has apostles who, with and by Christ, by their sufferings and prayers, and even by their death on the cross, merit with Christ this resurrection of working class youth and of the working class of the world. Joseph Cardijn, 1949.
So look, you know, we really probably didn't spend too much time towards the latter part of it. I think we all sort of can get our head around when Joseph Cardijn speaks about dignity of work and worker. We've got a sense of that. That's the latter part of the book and the theme. We've had our conversations about that. And again, today, how would our young people understand when they face the world of work, if they're lucky enough to get a job, how do they understand their sense of dignity and the dignity of work? Or conversely, how might it translate to perhaps a sense of entitlement? We tend to hear that sometimes, you know, young people can be quite entitled, and that's just something that's very interesting for me, as far as sometimes the distorted understanding of what we mean by dignity. It's not just about me, but me in relationship with, and I think that's where there's becomes a distortion about when people have an experience, when people seem to sort of express it as a sense of entitlement. I think they have a misunderstanding, but that's our job as formators. Look, we'll finish up there because I'm conscious of time. And what we've tried to do is say, look, here's this book that was a series of lectures in 1949 and unfolded, that's been captured, that speaks about the vocation of work, of the young worker, their mission, their dignity, their call to service, the impact of their awareness of what they do in daily life in their natural environment, whether that be home, in the work and so on, knowing that this mission is transforming them in the world. And that's really, you know, the essence of this book. And well, if you haven't had a chance to read it, you know, hopefully when you do read it, you'll pick up on the things that we've spoken about, and you might have some questions that you might ponder or speak with a group of people about so far as how is it relevant today. So I hand over to David. Yeah.
David, you got to unmute.
Thanks very much, Mark and Joseph. That was absolutely, I found it extremely interesting to get Mark's first-hand experience and Joe's translation, you know, from the teacher's point of view. Does anybody have any questions or comments that they would like to make?
Yeah, I'd like to comment on the double transformation or the technical word is interior dialectic, because I think that's really the key, one of the key parts, key contributions of Cardijn to church reform. It's intrinsic in all the religious orders that were formed after the French Revolution, Salesians in the scouting movement and so on, where they slowly got people, rather than keep listening to, like we were told we couldn't read the Bible without having the priest instruct. Well, it was drawing people to reflect on their own experience. Today we talk about words like discovering your charism, what's your gift to the world, and discernment. But this idea of double transformation, as you took an action, you would start to think. So if I go back to my branch days, we had a huge gang problem in the northern suburbs of Melbourne. So the priest encouraged us to set up footy teams and basketball teams and the cricket teams because the kids were bored. And then, of course, then we had to go and find grounds to play on. So that why was the council so reluctant to allot, you know, facilities for these things to take place, which would stop the kids bashing each other? And then we had, at that stage, we had a really great police commissioner who said in 4 country police sergeants who were told not to arrest these guys, but take them down and to the back room in the Broad Meadows police station and explain this was not a productive way to live. And we finally had a meeting with the key gang leader, and he said, I don't want to go to the back room. But what they made me think about is my actions were not being counterproductive to the group I lead or the people around me. I would think in modern terms now, it's really become critical because as people have become addicted to social media, they've stopped thinking. I saw someone quote a figure, 80% of people don't think anymore. They rely on what they see on the screen. And so that whole idea of working out why you're taking the action. So if I think about the inquiry that led to seatbelt, pressing for seatbelts by the Victorian Melbourne YCW, or I think about the housing thing, and now down to my Muslims that I work with, refugees, it's teaching them the same thing. Don't keep asking for things. What can you do? Because these people are really skilled, but they don't see that they've got skills. They're treated like the government see them as a problem rather than a solution to all of its problems. So it's getting those individual people to say, well, how, you know, what can you do? So it's a really key idea to the whole YCW thing. We have a lot of people in the modern church who don't understand the word judge. We have see judge. They think it's some sort of legal thing, but really judge is tied up with this discernment about making an interior assessment about what can I do or what further actions are required. So I think it's a really key element. And it's something that we don't appreciate as much as we could. And I see that being more necessary in young people today than even before. I see my grandchildren, they've got good social consciences, but they don't understand why. Okay?
Thanks, Wayne. Any response to that or any other comments?
If I can make a comment, David, and it's going back to something I think Wayne spoke about earlier, and also Joe a little bit about the some of the attitudes or approaches in Catholic education, and I've worked in Catholic education for a few decades myself. It seems to me that we're very inclined to reduce mission to what you can do, for example, in supporting Caritas or Vinnies or refugees or something like that. And of course, I'm not criticizing that at all, because it's obviously very worthwhile and very important. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't allow the young person to reflect on their own reality, their own immediate experience, unless of course they belong to one of those focus groups. It doesn't allow them to focus or to reflect on their own reality. And it means that their formation is, in a sense, directed towards doing something for someone else rather than learning about or understanding what the realities of life are. And I think that's a significant deficit that we need to sort of overcome. And I also think in relation to that, the idea of the double transformation works most profoundly when the action that's associated with the transformation is one that comes from your own life experience, not something which is a little bit removed from your experience. I mean, it's still obviously impressive and formative to work at something, you know, social change for refugees or for Indigenous people or whatever it might be. But I think it loses something if it's not derived from that own personal experience. So that would be my observation about, you know, what's missing from some of those experiences. Joe and Mark, you might want to add your reflection to that.
I totally take your point, Paul. I agree. I mean, I always say to myself, you know, and try and encourage, we do all these external things, you know, we do all these things, and we're adding things, and we just stop and hang on, what's happening in your everyday life? What's happening in your reality? What small changes or what awareness can you have in your daily life where you can bring about a change. But even for us, even just to listen and to know what their daily life is like and their daily reality, you know, because as you said, it's external, it's outside from them. But when it starts to become personal, it gets a bit tricky for them. So we've got to sort of tread a bit carefully with them because they're young people. But, you know, I totally agree. I think we're great with doing lots of things in externals and they're great service, but it doesn't translate into what happens within their own home, within their own relationships and friendships and so on. So, you know, one of the things I've said here at this school, almost to the point where I'm saying, no more "Are you okay" badges, no more anything. We're just going to really understand what our crest on our badge says, because that's everything about the dignity of the person, about accepting all and being inclusive and being generous and serving and so on anyway. But that's my 2 cents. Do you want to say anything?
I think you've hit upon a very, very important point, Paul. I agree with you. And if you talk about action being a challenge, personal action can be a real challenge because it is personal. You know, to review your life in confidence, you know, with a small group of people, and be prepared to have them ask you questions, and then you commit to something about your personal life, and then they know they're going to get back to you next week. Someone's going to write it down and say, "Did you speak to your father? You said you were going to. Did you do it?" That takes a lot of courage, a lot of friendship, and well, you know, I've just seen people too scared to do it, and you know, and these are professional people. These are priests. These are teachers. You know, they're not used to sharing their own life like that. But through doing that, you know, we talk about, you know, one of the judge questions: how are you part of the problem? You know, we look at the domestic violence that's occurring in Australia. It's a bloody disgrace, you know, and through personal reviews and stuff like that about what's going on in families, you know, maybe that's the way to get through to blokes, you know, that they should, you know, just take it easy, guys, you know, don't do this. Now, collective action, of course, that became the big deal later on. Everybody thought that collective action was the way to go. So collective action is also demanding because it means that you're out there making a stand on something. It takes a lot more coordination. It amplifies the action, so it can be really good. But in some ways, you're actually hiding in the mob as well, or you're riding the trendy wave, you know. So both have their place, and both are very important, you know, for formation and changing the world.
Yeah. Just to catch up last couple of comments. When I had my year 7 and 8, so the last 16 years of my career, I always started with, what's one thing you'd like to change in your family? And often the most common thing was loneliness. And so we got down, I had two lots of inquiries in their first couple of weeks of school. How much time I got them to keep a journal on, how much time to spend talking to your mother and father over the previous 2 weeks, not about asking for money, rides, anything else, but just had a conversation. The average conversation time with the dads was 30 seconds and with the mum was 2 minutes. And I put that on the board and said, so what are you going to do about that? and they said, you know, and then it came out, the next one was about me, how often they ate together as a family, you know, without the television on. That was, again, a poor thing. And they said, well, what can he do? And I said, well, you put your hand up. You're the oldest in the family. If you ask, can we have a meal at home? They're not going to say no. So we changed around family behaviours, and often that was the start to solving some family, you know, breakups and, you know, violence issues. And then I find we've just had this loneliness inquiry, and most of the people I work with in Melbourne are the over 60 group. Now, I divide them into the elders who get up every day with a purpose, and the old people get up and they want to talk about their medical problems all day. So yeah, it's a question about, and they'll whinge and they'll complain and saying, but you've got to oh, no one comes to see me, but you've got a telephone, you've got a computer, you've got this, teaching them to reach out, because it's not just children that lose that skill, it's the elders as well. And then there's the guys that work. Women are pretty good at communication, but guys at work get incredibly lonely. They get to a point of being in their 40s and 50s and feel they're being passed over. So again, in the current congregation, they've started 2 different men's groups. One's a pub night and one's a conversation under the tree night, just to get the guys talking, because they realise that guys communicate in a different way. But this is the sort of thing the practical things we can do all of the time. Even teachers these days, I keep laughing about what they call about teacher pressure, but teachers are no longer allowed to talk to each other anymore. They're too busy in front of their computers writing programs. These were sorts of work issues we dealt with 60 years ago, and they're still there, and we're increasing the pressure in work. So we need to ask the questions, and this process, there's that process, the whole Cardijn process allows you to ask the question, and frequently all you have to do, and this is Kevin Vaughan's great gift, he'll ask the question, he'll go into a group and he'll ask the question, but why are you doing it? What can you do? And it's had amazing results, and we can all do the same thing, because each Cardijn person is an agent of change.
Thanks, Wayne. Great conversation. Any other contributions to that? Okay, I kind of, yes, Stefan?
Oh, sorry.
Was that you, Stefan?
I was putting my hand up. Yeah, look, one of the things I wanted to say, I agree this is a very important part of the conversation. And I think this is one of the aspects of the whole Cardijn formation process that's least understood, and let's say even most looked down upon. Because sometimes, for example, in social justice groups, because somebody talked to their dad or went to the cinema with him or something like that, this is not kind of the real action for addressing social justice issues. And on the other hand, I also think sometimes it's not seen as Christian enough, because, it's not talking about Jesus or something like that. But I can say from my own personal experiences, my first action that I remember till today was being asked to make friends with an Aboriginal guy who was in our workplace, who nobody talked to, basically. And it took me a few goes sort of to try and actually make friends with him. And but in the back of my mind was, I'm going to the meeting next week, and I needed to sort of find the courage to do that. And it's something that I still remember 50 years later. But as I say, I think it's a really important part of the whole Cardijn formation process that we need to kind of help people to understand, because from outside, it sometimes seems too simple. Learning to do up your shoes in the morning. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. So I think this is an aspect that we need to sort of think about.
Thanks, Stefan. My comment of that is more abstract. When I was rereading the document again today, yeah, I mean, Cardijn's very much about starting with daily life, but then he also mentions that this is an international movement, and he's kind of laying the groundwork for it, for sort of more deductive social justice, global sort of issues to also be part of the whole stage. And so you've got this all the time, it seems, this dialectic, this balance of things that needs to happen. But perhaps, I don't know, that was my guess at it. But as I say, I've got no actual practical experience with that. So interested in the teacher's comments.
David,
any other comments?
David, I was wondering if we could throw to Heather and Tom and hear what they have to say.
Yeah, please.
It's Heather here. Sorry, I had a rather anxious woman knock on the door, so I had to spend some time with her. So I'm afraid I've missed quite a bit.
No worries, Heather. We were just talking. Actually, Paul raised the idea about the whole thing about justice, about helping, sort of a Caritas or Vinnie's, sort of jumping on a service bandwagon rather than starting with issues that are real and important in our own lives. It's a different way of formation that's perhaps overlooked these days. But do you have? Sorry, Tom.
Yes.
Do you have any?
I have to confess, I was never part of the YCW. I joined a community at a very young age, and so I bypassed the whole. So I'm here really just as an interested observer, learning from people who've been through the whole process and have just got a whole wealth of practical experience and knowledge. I suppose I've not had a great deal to do in my life with young people. I'm single, I don't have kids, so my life hasn't engage much with young people. So I have to confess, I'm very much as an observer and a listener, and I'm not sure that I've got a great deal to contribute. And I guess I've tried to, particularly in more recent years, practice informally the YCW process. So I do what I can, for example, with things like climate action. I do what I can in support of the Palestinian cause. So I guess I'm trying to put the process into practice just in my own life, but I don't have the life experience of the YCW myself. So I enjoy listening to you veterans, if that's a nice word.
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah,
Do you have any
yeah.
YCW people near you, or?
I know some people who were in the YCW. No, I don't have any. I got a couple of retired priests that I know, but they're a bit out of my sphere these days. Yep.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, Heather, I cut you off.
No, that's okay. It's just I'm a rather newcomer to YCW. I grew up in Melbourne in our parish. The only mention of YCW was the football. Every Sunday, the priest would say, YCW football is at such and such a place. So when we moved to Perth, when I was 17, this young, the leader, actually, I found out later of the YCW, she came and asked me to be a YCW leader. And I said, what does that mean? She said, come and find out. And I think since I was little, I've always had this sense of justice. We had a lot of migrants coming after the war. So we had many whom I was asked to help at school, and I would help them with their English and maths and stuff like that from the time I was about, 8, 9. Polish girl who couldn't speak English, Italians across the road, two from Croatia. But YCW just meant football. And when I found out what it was and started being involved, I was absolutely fascinated and still am. And I found out after I entered, I was using the See Judge Act in all our meetings and even introduced it into our international headquarters in Rome, and they were using it in all their meetings too. So I'm very, very thankful to Cardijn. I think he's been a tremendous blessing.
Can I ask what fascinated you about it, Heather?
I think it gave me a purpose. At our meetings, we did gospel discussion for the first part of the meeting. Then we were asked, is there any problems with our workplace? Or we would go visiting different, we would visit some girls within the parish. It gave me a purpose, an outlet for my sense of justice and my sense of gospel life. I just found it, and a way to make decisions. The See Judge and Act was a fantastic way of deciding what to do with my life.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks very much. Any other comments, or would you like to make any final comments, Mark or Joe? Or anybody else?
I would just like to react to what Heather had to say. Here's Heather. She moved into a new place and she's got somebody with anxiety banging on the door. The Christian mission doesn't stop. There's always something to review. There's always a role to play. And that's kind of like the milieu, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, Mark, no way could I say no to her. She was extremely upset. And I had to stay with her for quite a while.
Yeah.
But I'll catch up because this is being recorded. I will catch up.
Thanks, Heather. Well, if nobody else has got any other comments or observations, perhaps we should leave it there and back to you, Stefan.
Yeah, thank you very much, David. Well, yes, look, that's been a very active session. Thanks very much to you, Mark and Joe, because instead of just a presentation, you've turned it into a dialogue and a conversation and a participative event, which is certainly, I think, a very Cardijn way of having a session like this. And perhaps also it's also a way we might look at into the future as a way we can animate our future webinars more in this style. There's also many, many more documents of Cardijn that we could study in this way, perhaps together in 2025, being the centenary. Something, yes, that's perhaps a point to make before we leave. Next year is the centenary of the official foundation of the YCW in Belgium, and they've had their first national congress, and Cardijn had that special meeting with Pope Pius XI, where he recognised the movement and approved it. So I think we're coming up to some very big events in the life of the YCW. But of course, looking at ourselves, we're not so young, but we still, as we've heard just now, draw on the method, and there's so much more to learn in practicing it ourselves. So I just want to say thanks again to our presenters, and I wish you all happy Christmas. And we're also going to take a break as ACI over Christmas, and we'll be back in February. So we'll looking forward to be with you all next year. Thanks again to everyone.